let's see some different ways to create a one-dimensional NumPy array. So we have multiple functions are there. First of all, the first function is by using array function, you can create a one-dimensional NumPy array. You can use arange function also to create a NumPy array. You can use linspace function. You can use logspace function. You can use ones function, as well as you can use zeros function also. These are the different ways by which you can create a one-dimensional array in NumPy. Now let me start with array, then arange and so on. So let me remove all these things from here. Let me start with array function. So the first way is by using array function here. Let me use it as a heading. Now, so to create a one-dimensional NumPy array, directly you can use a equals to, first of all, we need to import NumPy here. Import NumPy as NP. You can use any other alias name for NumPy, but NP is very popular. That's why I'm using here NP. Now, so I'm using here NP dot array function, and then I'm just going to typecast my list into a array. So an array is a collection of homogeneous type of data where you can store only similar type of data here, and that we already discussed in the previous video. So 2, 8, 1, 6, 4, and 8. Run this code, you can see this is how we can create an array. Let me store it into a variable, check the value, and check the type of this A as well. You can see it is a one-dimensional NumPy array. You can check the dimension as well. It looks like this. So the first element is 2, 8, 1, 6, 4, and 8. We have some indexing for this array, as well as reverse indexing also allowed in NumPy. Okay, and to access the element, we can use the index values. Now, the next value is, let's use arange function to create a one-dimensional array. Arange function is actually same as Python's range function. Let me use it as a heading. In arange function, we need to put here 3 parameters. So in arange function, we need to give here start, comma, stop, comma, step. Let's see how we can do this. So a equals to np dot arange, and suppose I want to start from 2 to 9 and step is 2. Run this, and you can see the value of a here. So first of all, it starts from 2 to stop -1. That means 9 minus 1 is 8, and step is 2. So 2, after step 2, we have 4, 6, and then 8. And this will be the output here, you can see. And it exactly looks like this. We have 2, 4, 6, and the indexing over there. Okay. Now, if you want, you can check the type of this A as well as the dimension of this A. Okay. Now, in arange function, we have some default values also, like we have start parameter, stop parameter, and step parameter here. So the default start value is 0. The default step value is +1. But you need to give this stop value, that is mandatory. Okay, without stop value, it will generate the error. Let me show you. So if I'm using here np.arange, and suppose I'm just using here 1 to 9. So it by default it takes from start from 1 to 9 minus 1, and step will be +1 by default because we are not giving it over here. Okay, then you can use it like this also. np.arange, I'm using here only 6. I'm not giving any stop or step value. I'm just giving one value. By default, the interpreter understands this 6 as a stop value because that is mandatory. So it starts from 0 to 6 minus 1, and step is +1 default. And suppose if I'm using here np.arange and I'm not giving any output here, so it generates the error. It needs the stop value, that is mandatory. Okay, so this is how you can use arange function in NumPy to create a 1D array. If you want, you can give the step value in float values also. So if I'm using an np.arange 4 to 9 and step is 2.3. So that is also a way you can create a one dimensional NumPy array to give here the step value as float. Okay. Now the next function is basically linspace function. Here also you need to give three parameters, start, stop, but there is one difference here. Let me first of all let me define a heading here. Okay. Now, so in linspace function, basically here we need to give start value, stop value, and the number of element. These three parameters you need to put in linspace function. Let me show you. So np dot, first of all we use a variable here, np dot linspace function, and I'm going to start from 2 to 9, and in between 2 to 9 I want to access only 5 elements. So it starts from 2 to 9 and the step is, there is no step here, the number of element I want in between 2 and 9 is 5. So it includes the stop value, it will not exclude the last value. The value of a you can see here. In between 2 and 9 it gives you 5 elements, so 1 2 3 4 and 5. Now you can check the type of a as well as the dimension of a also. Okay. Now suppose if I'm using here np dot linspace, and suppose I'm just giving a start and a stop, I'm not giving the step value, so by default it will take the number of element as 50. This is the default value for number of element. If you're not giving the number of element value, it will take 50 as a default value. As you can see here, it is already mentioned. Okay, so this is how you can create a, you can use a linspace function to create a one dimensional array in NumPy. Same way we have a function called logspace also. Let's see how it works. In logspace function, again we have three parameters are there: start, comma, stop, and the number of element, just like linspace. Now, what is the difference between linspace and logspace? Basically, linspace will give you a general element. Start from 3 to 5, step is 5, the number of elements is 5. But here in logspace, it will give you the log value. So if I'm using here, and the base is by default 10, always it will give you the log value in logspace, and the base of that log value is by default 10. If you want, you can increase or decrease the value of base here. You can change the value of base here. If I'm using your np.logspace, here you can see you need to give your start, stop. The number of element is by default 50 and the base is by default 10. Let me show you how it works. Suppose I'm using your start from 2 to 8 and the number of element I want as 8 here. Okay. Now let's run this code. The value of a, you can see here this. Now what is the value of this? Basically, suppose if I'm using here, first of all, it will give you the value from 2. Just a minute. Let me give one more example here so that you can easily understand here. Let me use here from 1 to 8. Okay. Run this code. See. So when you're going to run this code, it starts from 1 to 8. It will not exclude the value. In between 1 to 8, it will give you 8 elements. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Now, then it will give you the base 10 log 1 value, base 10 log 2 value, base 3 log 3 value, and so on. So basically 110 and so on. This is how it will give you the value. Okay, so this is how it will give you the value. This is the log 1 value, log 2, log 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 with base 10. Okay, so this is how you can use log space value here. If you are not using here a equal to, suppose I'm using here np dot log space, in between 2 and 6 I want, suppose I'm not giving the element how many number of elements I want, so by default log space, so by default will give you 50 elements in between 2 to 6. Okay, so and it will give you the log value of these value with base 10. Okay, so if you are not giving the number of elements, it will take by default 50 elements here. So to get the log value, you can use logspace function. The next thing is we have once function to create a one-dimensional array in NumPy. Use it as a heading. Now, in once function, you can directly use it like this: a equals to np dot once function. Suppose I'm using here 7, and you can see the output here, a. In once function, it will give you the, you just need to give the size of the array you want, and it will give you the this size of once element one dimensional array. So you can see this array size is 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 elements are there in this array, and all the elements are ones, and it is a one dimensional array. If you want, you can change the data types also. Suppose if I don't want the float value here, so I can change the data type also. Suppose I'm using here the data type as, you can see, this is how you can define the data type also. Okay, suppose I want to define here another data type here. For data type, you can use d type. Let me convert it into integer. So you can see all the value converts into integer. Same way, suppose I want to convert all the value into string. So you can see all the value converted into a string. Same way, if I want to convert all the value into Boolean, you can see all the value converted into Boolean. And if I want to convert all the value in complex, you can see the value converted into complex. Okay, so this is how you can use once function to create a one-dimensional array with element 1. And by the same way, you can use zeros function also. Use it as a heading. Okay, done. It is exactly same as once function. So if you're using your a equals to np dot zeros, see, so here you need to give the shape of the element. Let me use here 4. So you can see here 4 zeros are there. You can change the data types also. So a, if you want, you can check the type of this a as well as the dimension of this a also. Okay, same way, suppose if I want to convert the value into the data type into integer, because by default it is float, so you can use your integer, float, character, boolean, any other data type also, just like once. So these are the different ways by which we can create a one dimensional array in NumPy.